Facebook, YouTube.
Yeah, let's have to do a trial run and see what happens.
Okay, I'm ready. Let's see. As ready as I'm going to be. Broadcasting to you live from the Milky Way galaxy, the solar system, planet Earth, North America, the United States of America, California, Los Angeles, to be specific. Hello, everybody. Brian Engelman. This is Agree to Disagree here on TheNewAmericanMedia.com. Blake Walley, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Brian. It's a fabulous day here in Los Angeles.
Wonderful weather. Good times.
It's raining quite a bit, but,
Good times, noodle salad.
Yeah, it was a good storm last night. I think it's going to continue throughout the day, but I think spring is finally around the corner. It's been a very unusual winter here.
Well, let's hope so. Today's episode is involving a whole bunch of cameras trying to get this set up again. As you all know, if you've been watching lately, a few new setups trying to get this to record. I don't know how ideal it is, but what is ideal is broadcasting to you. And that's the point of this show, and we're going to be doing a lot more of this moving forward. Today's topic is going to be the conversation that was had on the Joe Rogan podcast yesterday with Tim Pool and, oh boy, Vijaya Gotti. I believe that is how you pronounce the name. Vijaya. I'm messing up her name. But she was from the legal, from the department that handles the banning and the censorship and the silencing of accounts and the timeouts and the temporary silencing of people over there. And Tim Pool, who we ran into over at Politicon a few months ago, Tim was kind of emceeing this thing. He was brought in kind of as the guest for Joe Rogan to be his expert, to kind of be the person who's going to break down what's happening in the world of Twitter, because there's a lot of people talking about censorship, a lot of people talking about what's happened to that platform and social media in general. Blake, what are your thoughts real quick about what you've seen happening with Twitter over the years? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through some of the notes that I've taken. I've tried to distill some of this down. So if you don't want to watch the 3.5-hour podcast that Joe Rogan put together, maybe you'd be interested in getting our thoughts on it. So, Blake, what are your thoughts on what's happened to Twitter over the past few years?
I mean, it used to be like my playground. I used to really have a lot of fun there. But now it's kind of, I don't want to say it's pointless. It just feels like I'm not really getting any traction there. It's where I used to, be able to throw my opinions out, and some people would see things, retweet it. I had, nowadays it feels like, shadow banned or what have you. Like I can send out a great tweet with a hashtag and everything to 3,000 followers and however many people see the hashtag. Not that it's a huge reach, but it just seems like nothing ever happens. It's just like I'm, speaking into a vacuum, and I've just kind of lost my, desire to participate on that platform. It also used to be easier when I worked in conjunction with Facebook, where I could post something on Twitter and it would automatically go to Facebook. Now it doesn't. So now, and I don't know, because we know that there's censorship going on. We know that there's shadow banning or deboosting, but it's hard to prove. I really don't know what's going on. I've never had people at Twitter actually send me a message like, hey buddy, tone it down. We got to shut you down for a while, give you a 7-day ban. They've never said anything, but something's going on and I just don't know what.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And by the way, type your comments in on YouTube, on Facebook. Which one is which? I believe this is Facebook, the Agree to Disagree group. Type your comments in here. I'll try to get to them. And I believe this is live on Facebook in the New American Media page. Yeah, definitely. The deboosting. I watched another really good episode, Louder with Crowder, with James O'Keefe was on. And Steven Crowder's ready to go to court and go to war legally with Facebook for a lot of stuff that's been happening, the deboosting and the advertisements that he's paying for, but the product isn't being seen, and his account getting flagged 4 times for copyright infringement, although he's allowed to comment on the Oscars for fair use. A whole bunch of stuff. I suppose the easiest way to distill what's going on in a nutshell is that there is a selective enforcement of community guidelines and rules that's only being applied, as Tim Pool pointed out in one of the cases where he researched 20 of the 21 cases he could find. It was all right-leaning people and one minuscule left-leaning person. On a 20-to-1 basis. It's not even close. So I'm going to go into this and break it down. Definitely interested in following what Steven Crowder's doing with his lawsuit against Facebook. And I think we've reached critical mass here. I was telling Blake off air that I commented it was on the show called Undisputed. It's on Fox Sports. And earlier today, I left a message on their Facebook. What was it, on their YouTube page? On YouTube. It took Shannon Sharp about 35 seconds to lead with any critique of Kyler Murray, the Heisman-winning quarterback from Oklahoma. Any critique on him is racist, and it fits a trope. And it's about the black quarterback not being smart enough to succeed in the NFL, which is ridiculous. And I made a comment similar to what I just told you, that I thought it's ridiculous. And I came back 4 hours later. I checked. The comment right underneath me was posted the same 4 hours ago. It had 99 comments and 99 thumbs up, no dislikes, and 44 comments. Mine had no interaction whatsoever. And so I think what's going on here is that when certain accounts, and I've complained too. I've done shows on Ariana Grande. There was a shooting, I believe it was Ariana Grande overseas, and I talked about situational awareness, and if you go to concerts and public places, how you should have an escape plan with your family in case something bad happens. Demonetized. I got a flag on my account. Chris Cornell dies and Anthony Bourdain dies, so I talk about it, a flag on my account. I talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers, I get a flag on my account. I talk about the Cleveland Indians, I get a flag on my account, demonetized. And it's a ridiculous censorship that goes one way but not the other. And certain people are being hammered on these social media platforms, and other people are getting a free pass. So what I want to do is I want to just go through. I took some notes here. I'm going to call her Vijaya. And if I have the name wrong, I apologize. I only heard her pronounce it the first time, and I don't recall. But anyhow.
Yeah, Rogan could pronounce it either. I only listened to the 20 minutes or so far. I'm looking forward to digging into the rest, but I'm glad you took notes. So
yeah, man, for real. I really did, guys. I really took the time because I think it's very important, and it's all reached critical mass. So first off, I want to say great job to a lot of people. First off, I want to say great job to Vijaya and Jack Dorsey. Man, I need to get her name pronunciation right, because if I call her by the wrong name the whole time, it's going to annoy me. But anyway, and Jack Dorsey from Twitter, I want to thank them and say good job, kudos, because there was a lot of criticism that was faced during the first interview, where a lot of people gave Joe Rogan a lot of flack for not being harder in pressing Jack on specific instances, because in many situations he's like, well, I don't know exactly why that happened. And all the comments that flooded in after the fact, he said, hey, my audience is really upset. They have a lot of questions about this. Will you come back? He said he'd come back, and then he brought the person responsible for the team that does the that does the the censorship, permanently banned, temporarily banned. And so they were able to address a lot of the key issues. And I thought that was great. There's not a lot of people that actually step up and have that conversation. And I think it's real. Speaking against my best judgment here, I don't want to give Twitter any advice, but I think it's dangerous for Twitter to keep talking about the things that they are doing, that they're not doing, because they're starting to paint themselves into a corner here, because we saw it with Edward Snowden, we saw it with the NSA. A lot of times the official story is one thing and it sounds great, but in reality, something different is happening. So I think it's going to be interesting to pick apart the 3.5 hours of what Twitter execs had to say and find out what's accurate and what's a smokescreen, because a lot of this, I think, is going to be used against them, probably in a court of law. I think there's going to be there's going to be complaints filed. There's going to be legal challenges to, even just the issue of, is this a public utility? Is this a private company? How can you censor one side but not the other? So anyhow, despite the fact that I think it's dangerous for Twitter to be doing this, I give them props. I give them props for actually coming back and having the conversation. I'll give Joe Rogan props for bringing Tim Pool on previously to discuss this stuff, bringing Tim Pool back because he knew right away that he's a much bigger expert on the subject of social media censorship than Joe is. He wasn't even aware of a lot of these things. Obviously, he was with his buddy Alex Jones, of course. But great job to Tim Pool. He really came with a lot of energy, a lot of research, and a lot of tenacity. It was respectfully done, but it was, a lot of times he called him out. So I just want to say great job, bravo to all four of the participants there. I thought it was great. One of the things that was brought up pretty quick was Kathy Griffin and the concept of doxing regarding the Covington kids. And Blake, that's something I know you're well aware of, the issue of doxing. And I think it was brought up, well, okay, if you're going to ban and shut down the accounts of some people for doxing, why in the world does Kathy Griffin still have an account? What are your thoughts on doxing in general, or what Kathy Griffin did to the Covington kids, or take it as far back as Spike Lee trying to dox what he thought was George Zimmerman, but it was really an 80-year-old family in Florida? What are your thoughts on doxing, and is that something you're okay that should be a bannable offense on Twitter?
I think that should be at least some kind of a punishment. I'm not saying they should be banned permanently, but I mean that should be one of the most serious violations you can do to anybody. That's only for the most extreme of circumstances, and yeah, it's totally ridiculous that Kathy Griffin can get away with that, or Spike Lee can get away with that. But if it happened to somebody else, they'd probably be banned for life. And there's a lot of conservatives have been banned.
Yeah, absolutely. And, something that became pretty clear as this episode moved forward with, Joe Rogan, Tim Pool, Jack Dorsey, and Vijaya Gotti from Twitter was that, the concept of the incitement to violence. One of the things that became clear in this interview was that Tim and Vijaya were really having it was kind of acrimonious. It was it was a nice game of chess or tennis, whatever you want to call it. It was an interesting game because they were kind of going at each other politely, respectfully, but they really were not speaking the same language. And what she kept coming back to was, well, we're one of the main things that we're doing here at Twitter is we're going to do everything we can to protect people's safety. And Tim Pool just kind of called him out. It's like, well, if you're talking about protecting the safety of your users, how are you allowing certain people to be doxxed? Why are some people, he said, I've had calls to violence about me personally. I've reported it. Nothing's been done. They claimed that when reports are given that physical harm or physical threats have been made to the health and welfare of the participants involved on their site, that a human being, not just an algorithm, takes a look and they make the determination. And he said, well, if that's the case, on 3 separate occasions when this has occurred, why didn't you take action? The tweets are still up. The person's account's still there. It's disingenuous to sit here and tell me what you're saying because I know it's not true. And that's kind of where the Crowder versus Facebook thing comes in, is because it seems to be that there's a different set of rules. What Crowder was saying is that Facebook came to him and was saying, hey, we want to advertise with you. We want to work with you. Spend all this money. He said he spent hundreds of thousands of dollars advertising on Facebook. He said, but then they changed the rules. And so if you're going to have an open platform and you're going to have a business model and you're going to accept advertising dollars, well, at what point do you just change the rules and misapply them? If you're not going to equally balance and apply the rules, then effectively there are no rules. If you have subjective enforcement of the rules, then there are no rules. And I think that's an important thing to think about. And they kind of transitioned that conversation over to Milo Yiannopoulos. They were saying that, well, he was criticizing and mocking Ghostbusters. They said he was doxing. It's going to be hard to try to look at the entirety of anybody's social media existence and try to say, I think they did a good thing always. I can defend every single tweet they've ever made. That's pretty impossible. But Joe Rogan jumped in around there and he said, look, it always seems to be leaning to the left. You'll defend people on the left and you'll hammer people on the right. And when he said that, she disagreed. This is about 29 minutes in at this point. She claims, I don't know what that means. Okay, you're a lawyer you have a legal background. You're working at Twitter, and she claims that she doesn't know what it means to say that it seems like your enforcement is always leaning to the left against the right. I mean, Blake, what do you make of something like that? Someone that's obviously so involved in the protocol of a social media company to just on the surface say, I don't know what that means. I found that personally to be incredibly disingenuous and telling that I think we're getting a rehearsed story, but not the actual truth. Does that say anything to you?
Yeah, no, I mean, it'd be laughable if it wasn't like a serious issue. I mean, yeah, it's clearly they have a bias. And yeah, it's a left-leaning platform. Everybody knows it. And it's pretty ridiculous. And as you said, yeah, it's disingenuous to suggest that it's somehow like fair in any kind of way. It's clearly not. People that have been permanently banned are all conservatives, as far as I know. Or maybe you said one a liberal. I don't even know who they are. That's weird because I consider myself a liberal, but I'm also, don't seem to get much traction either. So I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, and
but you're against the Democratic machine and that side of their whole Snopes and their Huffington Post and their CNN. That seems to be the truth. And if people go against that or mock it, such as a Crowder has done, then they want to shut people down. And so it's obvious to a lot of us, but they want to play games, and they can't admit that, even if they know it's true. So they're going to play us for stupid.
Yeah, and after that, around 33 and a half minutes in, they're kind of digging down on this issue and saying, well, was that a threat or was that just something that's said colloquially, a colloquialism? That's such a fun word. They're kind of getting into the misgendering and the dead naming of people, saying that if somebody wants to go by a different name or say that they're a different gender, can you be banned off a platform for that? And obviously there's that case in Canada where that did in fact occur. And when they start talking about threats and what speech that could be endangering somebody, she said around 33 and a half minutes, that's how it sounded like to us at the time. And to me, it just sounded like really slimy, slippery, lawyerly bull crap is what it sounded like. Slippery, slimy, lawyerly bull crap. Well, that's how it sounded to us. That's how it sounded. How did that go? That's how it sounded like to us at that time. And it's just, it's a lot of covering your tracks. It's a lot of kind of hedging your bets. I know there were multiple times right after that. She says she kept going back to 3 strikes. Like in baseball, and it just sounded so funny and rehearsed. It reminded me of like Mark Zuckerberg. I like smoked meats. Look at this. I'm a regular Joe, just like you. Or like Pocahontas. I like a beer. Honey, would you like a beer too? And it just seems so robotic and rehearsed and fake to me. So, right off the bat, about 30, 40 minutes in, I had an immediate distrust of this person that Jack Dorsey brought in. I didn't believe her. I didn't trust her. I appreciated the fact that they were there. But like I said, in a roundabout way, I feel like they could be doing more harm than good to themselves, because I think a lot of what they had to say might come back to bite them. But it just sounded very rehearsed.
There's this arrogant academic liberals, and they convinced that they're right, and they love to play these little games and shut down their opposition.
Yeah, and they kept coming back to, it was like, well, they wanted to talk about the 3 strikes. You have 3 strikes. 3 strikes are really important. But then other times it was like, well, it wasn't really just the 3 strikes. It was in context. Tim. Context matters, Tim. It's all about context. Again, it's the context. So it was like they were told, it felt like they rehearsed. They wanted to get it out there that you were given 3 warnings. so that they could abide by the terms of their service agreement. Then they hedged their bets on the 3 strikes because some of the things that were brought up, I mean, Joe Rogan, and he was laughing out loud, talking about Sargon of Akkad and a few of these other people, saying, well, that's clearly a joke. He's clearly mocking you and your company and your selective enforcement, but you're saying that he said something that was horrible. Well, it's not just that. It's in context. And she kept saying, well, this is about, it's a targeted, if it's one person, if it's a harassment, if it's a targeted effort to harass one particular person, and that's where they brought up the Ghostbusters thing. And it's like, he was, Milo Yiannopoulos was critiquing what he felt was a horrible movie. And it kept going and going. And, they decided that was enough. They didn't want him on their platform and they kicked him off. But, like baseball. But it was just interesting how they kept saying it's about context. It's about context. Because I feel like that's a very subjective way to say, well, 3 strikes are kind of like the guidelines. But in the context of the game, the pitcher was doing really well. And we kind of wanted to see him get that no-hitter. So when you keep hearing somebody say in context, Blake, do you kind of get the feeling that I don't know, that they're trying to cover all their bases, if we want to stay on the baseball analogy here, that they're trying to give themselves an escape hatch, if you will, that it's about context more so than anything specific that can be nailed down?
Context matters, but clearly we've seen a pattern of double standards, so it's really hard to take them seriously on anything.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. At about 38 and a half minutes in, she says, I feel like there's a lot of assumptions in what you were saying. She says that to Tim about conservatives generally. And I thought this was an interesting point. I thought it was good. Worth mentioning a second time, how conservatives generally love having awful opinions from the left so that they can be mocked and ridiculed, whereas the left tries to get people banned. And they talk about Oliver Darcy and Alex Jones. So let's put Darcy and Jones aside for a second. What are your thoughts on that subject of conservatives and constitutionalists and libertarians love having awful opinions out there because they're so easy to dismantle and destroy, whereas the left, who has awful opinions, awful ideas, awful rationale, people like us want those opinions from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or, name your list of Looney Tunes on the left. We want them to talk because the more they talk, the more sane we sound. Well, what are your thoughts on that one as far as who's trying to shut down speech and for what ends?
No, it's a great point. I've never been called for, I loved it. When I was on Twitter during the heyday, I used to love trolling.
Blake, can you do me a favor? Can you move just a little closer to your mic, or could you talk up just a little bit? I'm trying to turn the volume up, but I'm maxed out here. You were talking about when you were on Twitter, you loved trolling.
Yeah, I love trolling and getting the conversation. And if people have a bad opinion, I'd like to, roast them and, have a little fun at their expense. I never called for them to be banned. But yeah, so now the left, they can't argue because their opinions, like you said, are pretty messed up. So they can't win in the battle of ideas, and they're getting absolutely destroyed in the meme war. So their solution is to ban, people that object to them, and then of course they want to ban memes. So,
well, the left can't meme. Maybe they should take up coding, Blake.
Perhaps. Good one, but it's one of those things where you get in trouble for saying something like that. Oh, you learned for coding, or what was the other one? If you're an NPC, just stuff, and they can't defend themselves, so they call for people to get censored and banned.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think it's interesting, because around that point they started talking about Oliver Darcy and Alex Jones. I know you've followed Alex a lot, and what they kind of brought up was like, well, look, Oliver Darcy has been going back through, boatloads of tweets from Alex Jones trying to get him banned. And there was an active campaign to try to petition Silicon Valley to ban Alex Jones. And Alex confronted him and said a whole bunch of stuff to his face, as, you have the right to confront your accuser, if you will. No punches thrown or anything stupid like when Jimmy Dore spit in Alex Jones' face. check out our channel. You'll see Blake's awesome videography catching that, by the way, at the 2016 RNC in Cleveland. But, I mean, did you follow the Oliver Darcy, Alex Jones thing very closely, or just kind of on the side, Blake?
I mean, I checked it out. I wouldn't say too closely, but I was surprised that they would allow this one, hack journalist from, fake news CNN to have that much power to dictate who gets to be banned. I mean, to take down a very powerful figure like Jones is pretty breathtaking. And from somebody who's, obviously very biased in their own right, it didn't make any sense. I mean, if Jones was really doing some horrible stuff and it was a lot of people complaining and saying, hey, at least give this guy a slap on the wrist, ban him for a week or two, I could see some argument there. But just because Oliver Darcy said something, all of a sudden, like, oh, okay, we'll take down Jones. No, I think that's totally BS.
Yeah, it was kind of weird, and I think they got into a few different things, and I don't have it in front of my. I don't know if I wrote it down. I'm just going line by line here, but they were talking about how Twitter's a global company and how they go back and forth between what are the community guidelines, what are the standards, and man, there's so much to unpack on this issue. But they were saying hate speech has been ruled as acceptable speech in America, that the Supreme Court has spoken. In America, you're allowed to say things that are vile. Any disgusting person has the right to speak. Now, there's a difference when you're actually breaking the law. If you are putting child pornography on your site, and they did discuss that pornography is allowed on Twitter, by the way, in case you're wondering. But, if there's child pornography, or if there's, doxing, or if you're calling to violence, if you're legitimately trying to do what Spike Lee and Kathy Griffin did, if you're encouraging people to commit a felony, or you're committing a felony by hosting certain content on there, well, then that is something that is illegal and you should be kicked off for. Set that aside for 1 second. Because that seems to be something that's just, okay, we all agree that if it's illegal, explicitly illegal, that should be kicked off. But it's a little different when should there be an escalating temporary timeout on the site? Should you have an angry mode for if you're typing a bunch of expletives? One of the things Joe Rogan brought up was, should there be an angry mode? Something could pop up. Hey, we notice you're using a lot of expletives. We're just going to give you 12 hours to think this one through and check back with us tomorrow morning. Kind of like have the algorithm just kind of catch stuff like that and say, a more civil discourse, think this one through. Or, we're going to put you on timeout for 12 hours. Then it goes, we're going to put you on timeout for 24 hours. And you have some sort of escalating thing short of breaking the law and doing ridiculous stuff. But it's with the selective enforcement, it just gets it gets lost, black and white and all these shades of gray. One of the thoughts I had was, if somebody's trying to take you out, and I've had this happen to me at different jobs and different walks of life. If somebody's trying to take you out, any myriad of reasons and rationale could be given, especially if you just point to a vague terms of service and say, well, it's about the greater context, Tim. It's about the greater context. Or you can point to any number of 3 strikes specifically if someone's trying to take you out. And it just kind of reminded me, because around 51 minutes in, they kind of started having a conversation about you are not a hamster. And what that means is that this whole misgendering and dead naming people, someone who's born a man and they want to become a woman or say that they're a woman or thinks they're a woman, they're in the process of transitioning and call me, Brienne or something at this point. If you continue to refer to them as Brian, you're dead naming them. You're giving them the wrong name. And Ben Shapiro, among others, like, it's about chromosomes. It's not about feelings. It's not about social justice. You're a guy or you're a girl. Like, this is science. This isn't up for debate. And it's similar to what Jordan Peterson was saying up in Canada. He said, I will not be compelled to speak how you tell me I'm going to speak. Now, I will personally call you by your preferred pronoun if you want. I don't care. but I refuse to let you tell me what I must call them. And it's kind of what they brought up there is they said, you are not a hamster. And he said, well, what's happening now on some of these social media sites and on some of, the chat rooms he's in and Reddit and 4chan and all these different places where people are being driven underground. Kick them off Facebook, kick them off Twitter, kick them off YouTube. They're going to other places. Speech is not stopping. But he said, well, instead of calling somebody, a transgender or a tranny or something, they're going to call them a hamster. Or they're speaking in coded language at this point. Because now you got the thought Gestapo running around, oh, you must do this and you must do that. And you cannot say this and you cannot say that. But I actually think that there's a value in allowing people to say what they're going to say, short of committing felonies, because that's going to be a permanent record of them and who they are and who they were at the time. I don't think it does anybody a benefit to ban speech they don't like. I think you should be able to mute the person, block the person, change the channel, engage with them in some sort of dialogue, discussion, or debate, and continue the conversation. I mean, Blake, it reminds me of what people say. Oh, well, if you build a wall at the border, they're just going to get a ladder. Well, they're just going to get a sharper shovel and they'll dig under it. They'll fly a drone over top of it. And yes, that is theoretically true. Because what this reminds me of, well, you're going to ban using certain words. Well, they're just going to call them hamsters then. Then it's a hamster. So, I mean, what's your thought on certain languages should be allowed online versus what's going to happen if they do continue to try to ban language as the thought police, that it's just going to morph into something that's the same with a little bit of a Halloween mask on it? How do you see that playing out?
I mean, I don't know. I'm just in favor of freedom of speech in general. I mean, if somebody, is saying a lot of inflammatory stuff, calling for violence, obviously that's a problem. If people are just, all kinds of horrible things they can say, maybe they're unidentified accounts, like a sock puppet account, I think maybe they could be exposed, or, you're going to get dox somebody. Maybe it's taking some, obnoxious sock puppet and putting a name and saying, hey, you got to be Bill Smith. You can't do, just some antagonistic cartoon character. So, that's a conversation to have, I suppose. Well, yeah, I believe everybody should just be able to say what they want and deal with those consequences. And, it's just in the nature of, I guess, being tolerant of each other and learning from each other rather than trying to shut us down and punish each other. That doesn't make any sense.
Right. I want to get to some of these comments real quick. This is on Twitter. Thank you all for watching. Leave your comments on Facebook, on Twitter. I'll try to get to some of them. Samuel Honeycutt, what's up? Greetings from Crook County, People's Republic of Illinois. He said that it should be a criminal offense. So true. James Smith is saying she seemed shifty. Yeah, she's got a legal background, of course, just like most of the people in Congress are coming from, I don't know the percentage, but I think it's a very large percentage of lawyers and people who are trained to double speak without actually saying a darn thing. But he's agreeing. James is saying she seemed shifty. And Samuel commenting, Congress twit occasional cortex. I do like seeing the occasional cortex one. That's kind of funny. Ocasio-Cortez. Samuel's also saying, then how does the Antifa morons, how do they get to use Twitter to get people to go to a restaurant or somebody's house and then attack them, just like Tucker Carlson? Great point. And it's something that it was brought up many times in this podcast about Antifa and how, in the comparison to the Proud Boys, how is Antifa, they're organizing, they're going in violent mobs to shut down our First Amendment right to speech. How are these accounts not been banned? And there wasn't really a good answer. I mean, she hemmed and hawed and deflected a little bit, kind of saying, well, this is a decentralized leadership, whereas the Proud Boys had Gavin McInnes. And by the way, Gavin said some dumb stuff, too, some stuff he should have received a ban or a temporary ban for, but dehumanizing, depersoning a person, trying to erase them from the digital landscape. I just think it's a really weird draconian Orwellian North Korea type thing. It's almost like that Chinese social credit. You can't open up bank accounts or you can't, You can't get on flights unless you're a good citizen. It's a creepy Orwellian thing that we're getting into, the thought police. But yeah, they definitely talked in this episode a lot about Antifa compared to the other ones. Yeah, how can they go attack Tucker Carlson, his family at his house? How do they still get accounts? How are they selling merchandise? It really doesn't make a lot of sense. But anyway, back to this one about 52 minutes in. She did say, and the Twitter reps, Jack Dorsey, they did say, thank you for the feedback. Our intent is not to police ideology, which was very interesting. Our intent is not to police ideology. And it was around that time, and it was, peppered throughout at different points. Tim Pool and Joe Rogan, they definitely kind of pushed back on that. It's like, well, hold on here. You've definitely taken the side of transgender rights, but it's not like science is settled on what transgender is. Is this, a body dysmorphic issue? Is this, if you talk to middle America versus all of you up in Silicon Valley, there's very different opinions on the transgender issue, and science with chromosomes, X's and Y's and all that jazz. You are policing ideology. You're saying that your ideology is correct and that middle America is not allowed to have an opinion on it. And they've banned people in Canada for this. Canada's put, hate speech laws in effect to protect all these transgender issues that had just seemingly popped up out of nowhere a couple of years ago with the bathroom issue and Charlotte, North Carolina, and the NBA All-Star game. And there was a lot of pushback on that about changing terms and not to police ideology. At 55 minutes in, she says, we have a lot of protected classes, gender, race, nationality. She was kind of in a snarky kind of, well, there are a lot of protected classes of gender, race, nationality. And Joe Rogan jumped in, rightfully. He retorted, but there's not for white people. And it just seems like there's a selective enforcement of there are protected groups of people online, but you can hammer away at white people, at men, at cisgender, at Christian, at anything straight. You're allowed to make fun of, bash, and attack ideologies, identities, as long as they're white and male and Christian and this and that. Blake, what do you make of that? Because some people want to say that's the way it should be, that there are marginalized groups of people that have historically been mistreated. So to even the playing field, we'll get you back. We'll show you good. And you can't have feelings and you can't have equal rights because people that came hundreds of years before you were bad people and did bad stuff. So you're not protected today. Well, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it's just another double standard issue. They're protecting this, fringe minority, and of course they're people and they have rights. But I mean, we can't just override reality and give people special treatment. I mean, I have no problem if somebody's transgender. Just be open and honest about it. I don't know. It's a tough issue, but if you say that the slightest criticism, then yeah, it's just you're hateful, and it gets pretty bad. And some of these people make interesting points, like you bring up Shapiro or whatever. It's biology, and if people want you have a certain identity, I don't know where we draw the line, but certainly shutting people down and trying to to change the rules to protect. Yeah, again, a very, very small percentage of the population just doesn't make that sense. Not that they, of course, have their own rights and they have to be treated as like everybody else, but we can't give them special treatment and then make it double standard. And then, they're go after Chris. Yeah, it's fair game to talk, say all the most horrible things against, or whites or Christians, as you say, or Republicans. That's fair game. Yeah, it's not the other way around.
And Tim brought that up about how that I believe it was that Oliver Darcy was. He was saying that making fun of the Republicans. I don't know what it was, it's CPAC or whatever thing it was, and saying something along the lines of it's just feeding a bunch of red meat to idiots on the right, something along those lines. I'm definitely paraphrasing there, and said this isn't a journalist, this is a hack activist with an extreme political ideological bent against this certain group of people, and you're allowing that, and you're backing that, and you're taking down his not his enemies, but people he doesn't like. It's almost like you're working in cahoots with him. It was right around that time that they kind of continue the conversation saying, what is racism? And it is hypocritical to allow making fun of white people all day long. And they brought up Sarah Jeong of the New York Times and all the disgusting stuff she's had to tweet. And it just seems like it's okay to bash certain groups of people, and other people, certain groups are protected in a different way. And I really think go back to where she says that there are protected classes of gender, race, nationality. I mean, it sounded like that awful college teacher that you had that thought they were smarter than everybody else in the room. I don't know how long you were indoctrinated by this stuff in high school and in college, but man, I had it. I had this stuff pushed on me 20 years ago, and I resisted it then. I got bad grades for it then. I got pushed back for it then. I had to appeal grades with socialist professors then, and it's only multiplied and amplified at this point. I think if you just go back and watch her around 55 minutes saying, well, we do have a lot of protected classes, gender, race, nationality. But then they point out Sarah Jeong of the New York Times. Okay, but it's okay for her to be a horrible human being and say disgusting stuff, but other stuff is not. So I think it's interesting. I think it's disingenuous, but I think it's really telling. Going to some of the comments here in the on the YouTube page. Let's see. Samuel is saying that Himmler would be proud. Oh, by the way, if you're watching on the Facebook feeds, do me a favor. Click the like button. Tap the like or the hearts. Go like that. Give us a bunch of the likes and the hearts to show the algorithm, because all hail algorithm. All hail algorithm. Because, it was the buzzword of the day on yesterday's Rogan Twitter podcast with Tim Pool, because it's all about the algorithm. And my stuff's been automatically flagged so many times, and there's no human to dispute when you dispute that something was flagged erroneously. They say, well, if you get 1 million views in the next 10 minutes, we'll decide to maybe take a look at it closer then. And then they never get back to you. So anyway, Samuel saying Himmler would be proud. Yeah, definitely. James is saying that trans people are slowly destroying women's sports. You know what? I kind of get your point there. There's a lot of back and forth about should men who decide that they are female or now female or becoming female, should they be allowed to compete against women in women's sports? I'm seeing more and more of these stories, and the answer is no. No. Biological men and biological women are very different. But once again, if you say stuff like that, you can be banned. The ban hammer could come out, so you got to say something about hamsters. That's how weird this has become. Jason is saying, Samuel's agreeing with him, and Jason's saying, yes, James, there's a total backfire on women's equality. Yes, and saying, did you see where the boy won his second women's wrestling title? I think it was in a high school tournament. Jason saying, I misgendered a tranny at a KISS concert last week. True story. What message has been held for review? By the way, I'm getting this right now. Potentially inappropriate messages are held for review. Can be seen by me, but hidden from public view. You can make them. See, I'm getting this right now. Here, how do I show you? I'm getting something that's talking about potentially inappropriate messages. What is that? Because they said the word tranny? Is that what? I mean, that's a shortening of. Oh, no, it's this next message. White, Christian, or Semitic people can be bashed with impunity. Okay, I'm going to click show because I think you're allowed to have that opinion, Samuel. But all hail algorithm. All hail algorithm. Hopefully I'll be allowed to speak tomorrow about that. Algorithms are stock now. Hi, Keith. Thanks for watching over here on Facebook. He's saying, why don't women that transition into men attempt to compete in men's sports? Hey, that's a great point. Because maybe there are genetic and biological differences. Hello, Tony. Thanks for watching. Anyway, back to my notes here, Blake. Actually, while we're on the subject, what are your thoughts on, trans women, men who are trying to switch over to competing in female sports? What are your thoughts on that one?
It's not fair. It shouldn't count. They should have their own category, I guess. I mean, I hate to discriminate against people being able to, qualify for a medal or something. But I mean, it's not fair. I mean, what if clearly there is a biological difference, and yeah, you're seeing they've let a few of these men or that now are women in, and yeah, they're dominating, and it's totally not fair. It's not fair to the women that are in there. And they've had scandals in the past, I believe. They're saying the Russians were doing stuff like that to cheat during the day, back in the commie days. I don't know. But, it doesn't make any sense. And as you said, there's no women that are wannabe men going into those kind of sports. No, it's not physically possible.
Yeah, I think there were a lot of East German women jokes, and I think that was more along the lines of steroids. But, I would not want my daughter, and Tony's agreeing over here on Facebook. Thanks for watching, buddy. How you been? He's saying, I think it's unfair. It absolutely is. Would I want my daughter to be grappled by somebody that was born a dude, 17 years earlier? No, like that's not. If she wanted to break into men's wrestling or break into football where it's a men's team, and if she's deciding that that's something she's okay with, then hey, that's on her. But if some guy wants to put his hair in a ponytail, call himself by a different name, say, I want to wrestle, I don't care what you want. And the reason there's men and women in sports is because the best athletes in each sport, men or women, they have different limitations physically. That's it. I don't hate anybody that wants to go through this. I'm not going to try to destroy the lives of anybody that goes through this. I mean, I've been to the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I used to bartend at a club that had drag night every, Wednesday? I don't care what people do. But when you have societal norms, such as men's and women's sports, I think it's common sense that you would want to keep those segregated for obvious reasons. So I don't know. Anyway, moving on past that. About an hour and 5 minutes in to this conversation on the Joe Rogan podcast with the executives from Twitter, Tim Pool says to Twitter, he says, you're also being accused of being biased against the right wing in the Indian election too. So apparently in India, they're picking sides, and they're not picking the right wing side, they're picking the other side. And so I think what's happening is that Twitter is very aware, and people like Tim Pool and Joe Rogan are very aware of Twitter's impact on elections. And I think they're rightfully calling them out for the things that they're allowing, the things they're backing, the things that are trending, the things that are silenced, and the things that are promoted. What kind of impact do you think social media has on elections, Blake? And do you think that there should be some sort of forced neutrality if you're not going to have government intervention? I think that's what Tim Pool brought up was, if you're not going to play fair, if you're not going to enforce this stuff equally, well, you're inviting legislation and oversight by government. You're picking a different set of standards in the United States justice system. And by doing so and picking your favorites, you're going to bring in the regulation that's going to destroy your company. That was a point of contention. But as far as the elections go, and we saw it for 2.5 years, we've heard about this Russian conspiracy theory. What are your thoughts on the role of a place like Twitter or Facebook regarding elections? Because there's power and money regarding the outcome of elections. That's clear. What do you think that Twitter's role should be in that on that subject?
I just stay out of it for the most part. But yeah, if they're banning, conservative opinions and banning their memes and stuff, they have a lot more to do with trying to affect the election than the Russians ever did. Obviously, that would just turn out to be a conspiracy theory, but it was certainly just weighted so far against Donald Trump. It was amazing, that he won. That was a great part, and to defy all the odds because he had everything stacked against him. His followers trying to promote him on Twitter or Facebook, and then those people getting either banned or shut down or shadow banned or what have you. And then, you can talk about the foreign influences. There's a lot of ways that they can affect that. And when it's all said and done and we look back on 2016, it's going to show that there was far more collusion against Trump between the media in social media than there was with any on the other part. It had nothing to do with Russia. And yeah, if we talk about Russia, what about how much money did China or Saudi Arabia put in to the election to try to push Hillary?
Thank you. And that's exactly where I was going next, is that, throughout this podcast, a couple of times it got brought up. Tim asked the question, well, didn't a Saudi prince buy 6% of your company for, what was it, millions or billions? I forget the exact number, a ton of cash. And they said, well, we are a company that has investors, but that doesn't mean that he sits on the board of directors. I said, well, yeah, fine. But if someone's throwing I don't know, tens of millions of dollars, I forget the exact amount, massive, let's just say massive amounts of money, don't you think that buys you a place at the table so that your opinion will be heard? And it was something that I think they were kind of prepared to answer, but I don't think they really did, because, and then the question was asked, well, are you enforcing the same sets of standards in Saudi Arabia, in Iran? You're talking about LGBTQIA rights, but this is literally a crime in some of these countries. Are you enforcing the same hate speech equally, or are you giving these Arabic countries a free pass? And it was something I don't think I got a satisfactory answer on. I think they kind of went back to the fact that they're a global company and that they've been banned in Iran. And of course, we saw the Green Uprising in 2007 that Barack Obama, I believe it was 07, that Obama did not support. Was it 07 or 20? When did Obama come in? He came in.
2000. So yeah,
maybe it was 09. Whenever the Green Uprising was, and he refused to back the people, he backed the regime to bring out the billy clubs and knock the people back a little bit. But so that was an interesting question. Are you enforcing the same set of guidelines in all countries, or are you giving certain restrictions to different countries based on different? I didn't get a good answer on that. I'd like to dig down on that and find out, because they're a global company. What does that mean with your terms of service? What does that mean to how you operate globally on a total scale? Once again, she did come off very slippery. I didn't really believe a lot of what she was saying. I appreciated her being there, but it's interesting when they brought up Sarah Jong and they talked about these Arab countries and different sets of standards, and then bringing up that they've been accused of picking and choosing a particular side in the Indian election. That this is something that you are not neutral. You are active. You, Twitter, you are actively participating in the swaying of elections. That's collusion. That's interference. That's the same crap that you've been blaming Russia for 2.5 years without any evidence. Keith is chiming in here on Facebook. He's saying, I agree. Twitter does not play fair, but any government intervention is a slippery slope. Yes, Keith, I agree with you completely. That's pretty much exactly what I believe Tim Pool and Joe Rogan had to say. It's like, hey, we're not threatening you with this, and we're not saying that we want this. We're telling you how much of a nightmare it's going to be when government does decide to get involved. So get your act together so that they don't have to. But if you don't get your act together, I guarantee you that's where we're headed. And I thought it was pretty fair to bring that up, because I think the writing's on the wall that, we're headed toward, and Tim kind of said toward the end, they talked about him getting a mobile news van to go around the country when the Civil War starts, and about him being a prepper. And he's kind of pessimistic, kind of saying, look, Pandora's out of the box. There's no unscrambling these eggs. We're doomed, and I'm going to be there to film it when it crashes. Samuel over here on YouTube is saying Michelle Malkin was warned by Twitter that she was violating Pakistani law when she talked about Muslims. Great point. Thank you for bringing that up, Samuel, because that was another point of conversation on this subject, that they asked the question, well, okay, so Michelle Malkin was given this notification. What does that mean? Are you threatening Michelle Malkin? Because apparently there was I believe it was around a picture of Muhammad. Okay, so why should she in America care about Pakistani customs or Pakistani law? So is that a threat that you better not do that, or else you're going to get kicked off American Twitter? On the flip side, Tim Pool said, well, I would like to know if a foreign government has me on their hit list. So that will help me determine whether I travel to that country especially seeing what happened with Otto Warmbier over in North Korea when he was tortured beyond comprehension. I won't get into the details over there because I've had it with North Korea at this point. If they're not going to play ball, destroy them. Look at what they did to Otto Warmbier. But, foreign governments do not play by the same set of rules. And so it might be helpful to know. What are your thoughts on that one, Blake? Would you take a warning like Michelle Malkin got about Pakistani law as a threat or as a heads up that, hey, you're now deemed as hostile in that country, just so you know, watch out when you're dealing with them? Which one would you prefer as a user?
I don't know. It's pretty horrifying. I never heard anything about that, so I don't know what the story is or why she got involved with that. I mean, I know recently Saudi Arabia, I think they banned memes. Now it's like a 5-year sentence. China, of course, has their own internet structure set up, so you can't even say anything there. So, no, it's pretty alarming, and we certainly don't want to be anything like that. But I'll have to look more into the Malkin thing, and I didn't know anything. And Tim Pool saying, the places he wouldn't be safe. I don't know exactly what's going on with the worldwide Twitter and what's going on there. I'll have to do some more research on that, but I'd be curious.
Yeah, and Samuel over here, Samuel Honeycutt, is saying they told her she better get a lawyer and that they would have fun trying to extradite her. Anyway, moving on here at about an hour and 8 minutes in, they talked about hate speech is protected speech. So why is Twitter enforcing guidelines that do not protect the American First Amendment and can allow for election manipulation? I thought that was a great question. This is settled in the United States. There's a standard here, and Twitter is not abiding by that standard. They're going above and beyond with their personality, with their own thoughts, wishes, and ideologies that's trumping what the reality is in America. We have a First Amendment right to free speech, and in America, Twitter's not allowing that. So if that can allow for election manipulation, why is Twitter enforcing guidelines that don't protect the American First Amendment? Great question. I'd love to get a better answer than they gave.
I guess they're a private company, and who knows where they're being influenced from behind the scenes. And, that's another story. But certainly they should at least be transparent about what they're doing.
Yeah. Keith on Facebook is saying the Dems could regulate conservative talk radio if they take power again. He's also saying who in Pakistan would even really care what Michelle Malkin tweets. Sounds like Twitter is stirring things up. Yes, that's possible. Who knows? But I know right after that part that they were talking about, they said you have become too powerful to not be regulated if you limit free speech. So I know I'm saying some things in advance of when my notes are telling me to say them because I'm kind of accessing them from memory. But the quote was, you have become too powerful to not be regulated if you limit free speech. Hell yeah. Great to say it because that's not a threat. That's the reality. You've become too big and you've become too powerful to not be regulated if you don't allow for American free speech. Twitter's, they are painting themselves into a corner. Same like the Patreon CEO. We've seen this. The more they talk, the less what they're saying kind of makes sense. And that's why I said, if I were advising Twitter, I would tell them to shut the hell up and stop having these conversations. I, as someone who has been completely shadow banned, demonetized, deboosted, flagged, all of the things you can imagine on social media, I love that these conversations are happening. So bring them on. I want more of these. But if I were advising them, I'd warn them to be quiet because, man, the more they talk, the more it's like handing them more rope. Just go ahead. Keep talking. Moving on here. Hello to Greg. What's up, Greg McWhirter? How are you, buddy? Chime in with your comments on any of these platforms, if you will. Samuel is saying they and Facebook are publishers at this point. No platform as they claim. Yes, of course, that's the back and forth that they're having, the conversation. They said we do have an issue with foreign entities and misinformation. They're talking about Russian collusion, but then they brought up the case, where was it, Alabama or Mississippi or Mississippi maybe, where there were political operatives that pretended to be Russian to try to influence an election, and they were identified, they were outed, but their company and their tweets were allowed to stay up. The people weren't banned, and it was allowed to continue because it was trying to make Republicans look bad. About an hour and 10 minutes in, they said rules are designed to drive opportunity for every single person to speak freely on the platform. Tim says that's absolutely not true. The quote that they were saying was, rules are designed to drive opportunity for every single person to speak freely on the platform. That's not true. That is absolutely not true, and I agree with that. That is absolutely not true. They're trying not to offend people. They're trying not to offend certain types of people, but they're definitely allowing offense of other groups of people. Please keep talking, because the more you talk, the more ridiculous it is. About an hour and 19 minutes in on the Joe Rogan podcast with Tim Pool and executives from Twitter, they brought up the learn to code concept. The learn to code, about, an hour 20 minutes in, saying that's not true. Tim, don't misrepresent me. They start talking about coded language, and the Daily Caller editor was suspended when he tweeted #LearnToCode. He said this is about snooty, elitist journalists who were being called out and mocked, who got laid off of their jobs because they were writing about the 50-year-old coal miners in West Virginia, Middle America. Say these elitist, snooty journalists were saying, well, they should just learn to code. As if someone 55 years old in West Virginia is going to just be able to learn a brand new 21st century, 2019 ability. It's just not something that's going to happen. You can barely turn into a Walmart greeter at 60 years old. So learn to code was mocking the people that were mocking or they're so out of touch that they were accidentally or inadvertently mocking the people, the coal miners in West Virginia. And then there was an ensuing debate at that point, saying, where do you stop? Where do you stop with that? What community is and what isn't deserving of protection? Are conservatives not deserving of protection for their opinions? They're being driven away. So, I mean, did you have any thoughts on the learn to code thing? I'm not sure how closely you followed it, but it was a pretty interesting moment because Twitter definitely teamed up and ganged up on people that they said were ganging up on specific individual journalists, kind of as a snarky retort to their completely misguided or snooty, quasi-intellectual, demeaning manner in which they dismissed all these people that would allegedly be laid off if you shut down the coal industry. Did you have any thoughts on learn to code, Blake?
No, I thought it was clever. I thought it was hilarious. And the left can't take a joke. They get really offended when those journalists started losing their jobs, and maybe rightfully so. I don't know. I'm not going there, but that was they were putting that out there. And I thought it was funny, but they did not. And using these types of things as a reason to shut down their opponents again.
All right. Gotcha. Moving on here real quick. They were saying, there we go. There was a quote that she said, our biases influence us putting a rule like this into place. I thought that was fantastic. They talked about middle America, and they talked about the East Coast, West Coast people, and, the fact that there's going to be a bias if you're hiring everybody in Silicon Valley versus if you open up an office and have people in middle America. In her response, of course, didn't address middle America. She said, well, our team is global. Yeah, are they global in the big cities where you have all the leftist opinions? A lot of the answers that they gave were just like, ugh. You didn't answer the question. I know what you're not saying. And furthermore, I do know what you're hiding. I could tell it in the way that they said what they said, and I could tell it in the way they didn't answer the question specifically. About an hour, 46 minutes in, they talked about, this is something big for Joe Rogan, redemption, rehabilitation, and temporary suspensions. Jack Dorsey says, we haven't done a good job. And I liked that. I liked that he was at least honest enough to say we haven't done a good job regarding redemption, rehabilitation, and temporary suspensions. They kind of talked about how permanent banning is the last tool that they should be using in their toolbox. They don't want to be doing it. Well, then why do you keep doing it? So this conversation was, well, thank you for your feedback. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you for your feedback. Almost like they've never heard this conversation before. At one point, where is it? She says, well, I'm skipping ahead here, but she said sunlight is the best disinfectant, which is garbage because they want to ban ideas and speech that they don't like. That's not sunlight. That's the opposite. Samuel here in the YouTube channel, he's saying the First Amendment particularly protects unpopular speech to protect the minority from the majority. Exactly. So, suspensions, redemption, temporary suspensions. Do you have any thoughts on that as far as people like Milo, like Alex Jones, like Gavin McInnes, or go down the list of people that have been permanently banned? I mean, do you have another suggestion or solution or any other ideas of what they're doing, how it could be any better than it currently is?
No, I think that's absolutely right. They should be, if they want to ban, if they really said some awful things, if they want to ban people for a certain amount of time, like I think a 30-day suspension should be like at most. I mean, it would have to be some pretty major stuff to actually permanently ban somebody's voice. I think all these people could be brought back. I mean, yeah, I was very critical of the Milo stuff when he started attacking Leslie Jones. That was horrible, and I was outspoken about that. I sent a few tweets about that, but I would never have called for him to be banned. That was terrible. I think he took enough of a backlash. He looked like childish, and it was a terrible thing what he did. But he's allowed to say it. Of course, I think there's a lot of other people. I think Charles Johnson and Roger Stone, of course, Alex Jones. I mean, if they say something really horrible, they deserve to be punished. Fine, there should be some sort of a system in place where you get a warning, a 3-day suspension, a week suspension, a month suspension. But beyond that, to be permanently banned, I haven't seen anybody who has deserved that, unless, there could be some really horrible, violent, hateful stuff. I don't know but not from any of those people. Yeah, people. I've said some inflammatory things before, but I've never been banned on it. Anyway, the point is, it should be a platform for everybody to interact and have a conversation, and there should be little punishments here and there, but not the heavy-handed permanent banning. It's terrible. It should not happen, and these people should all be invited back.
So somebody else that was banned, Sargon of Akkad, what's his name? Carl Benjamin, something like that. Sargon of Akkad. They got into, okay, well, let's talk. This time they got into specific cases, and they wanted to dig down on specific people that were banned, and they wanted to know why. So they said, okay, well strike one was Sargon typed blah blah blah, this and the other, and fuck white people, and they all burst out laughing like, this dude is a white person. He's showing you the hypocrisy of Twitter's guidelines. Like, how are you? You're going to list a strike on him, pointing out how you allow people to bash white people all day. It's kind of unbelievable. I've seen a lot of Sargon stuff. Some of it's fantastic, and some of it is cringy. It's a little Trumpian that way. You love some of it, and some of it, you wince. You go, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have said that, or, oh, that came out really clunky, or that's easy to misinterpret, and it's just kind of, and then she backed off like, like I never really considered that could have been a thing. And they got into it, and they're talking about, if you had somebody from Middle America inside of that room that was going to be doing the banning, they go, no, that's clearly satire. He's making a joke about how you're a joke. And then that's where Jack jumps in at about 2 hours, 23 minutes. He says, these are exactly the conversations we are having. Bull crap. Those are not the conversations you're having, because there's nobody in your room that thinks like Middle America, that thinks rationally. You're hardcore leftists pushing an ideology. You guys are social justice warriors that are campaigning to virtue signal how awesome and progressive you are to everyone else. Nobody in the room is bringing you back down and giving you a little dose of reality. You could use a little dose of reality. If you want to stay relevant and keep your platform up and running, it would be pretty helpful to have that. So, these are exactly the conversations we are having. Well, then you need to hire people like Blake, like Tim Pool, like me. Somebody put us in the room with you nut jobs, and we'll help you see that, You're not getting the bigger picture here, that your heavy-handed tactics are just making this much worse. I don't know how they couldn't get that that was sarcasm. Skipping past where she says sunlight's the best disinfectant. Oh, yeah, don't forget the Southern Poverty Law Center. I think I had notes on. Yep, I do have notes on that. Samuel Honeycutt, you get a gold star, good sir. 2 hours, 39 minutes in, they talk about what I said earlier. Once again, I'm circling around as I wrap this up here. How they're actively looking at decentralizing their workforce to get out of San Francisco and into Middle America or Blue America. Awesome. Well, Ocasio-Cortez or Occasional Cortex, she kicked Amazon out of New York and they're going elsewhere. Yes, please take some of your headquarters away from Looney Tune San Francisco and put it in a place where people are common sense. And Jack kind of kept going back to, well, my dad listened to Rush Limbaugh and I was on the Sean Hannity show. And I'm so blessed to have these alternate, theories in my life. And I can see both sides. And it's like, man, Jack, if that's even remotely true, this wouldn't have gotten this far. I appreciate them having the conversation, but I'm not buying it. I'll buy it if I see it. Joe, at the end of the interview, he asked, are you going to be able to, can you implement some of these changes? Can I bring you back in 6 months? And Jack's like, well, it's going to take a lot longer than 6 months. He goes, let me run it then. There's no reason this stuff should take longer than 6 months. There's no reason. You're a platform that deals in the currency of 140 characters. Okay, now it's 280. What is your platform? What are you? You're just a place that people type 280 characters. It's not that complicated. So I think Joe was right to throw up his arms and go, you gotta be kidding me. You can't make changes in 6 months? Give me a break. A lot of lip service. I'll believe it when I see it. 3 hours, 2 minutes in, they brought up the Southern Poverty Law Center, and Tim Pool said, do you take their advice? She hedged, she hemmed, she hawed, and she said, no. And that was duplicitous as well. She later kind of came back, circled around, and said, yes, they have talked to us, and we don't take marching orders from them, but they have communicated things to us from time to time, but it doesn't mean that they work for us or that we listen to them. But so she hemmed and hawed, and the Southern Poverty Law Center, I mean, they are documented as the pit bulls of the extreme left. And if that's going to be your policing guidelines, I think you're in desperate trouble. Hi, Diane. Welcome to the show. Sorry, it's toward the end of it. Maybe you can click on the beginning when we upload this. And you can check out the rest. But Diane is saying the best dose of reality is breaking up their monopoly. Yeah, and that got brought up a lot. Tim Pool kept talking about the monopoly and said, well, okay, no, there are other things like Gab, there's Facebook, there's YouTube. But if you're not on Twitter's the one. Twitter's the one that everyone's using. So if you're banned from it, you've essentially created the monopoly and nobody else is allowed in. And Blake, to your point, Twitter, all of these social media companies, when I put my comment up and down right next to the other one today, 4 hours ago, and I see that one gets 99 interactions and 4 thumbs up and 44 comments going, and mine is sitting there ignored. And I said something similarly intelligent, well-spoken, well-thought, good grammar, zero interaction. There is something in these algorithms that have deboosted whether my content is seen. And Blake, they've taken the fun out of social media for a little bit. I mean, as far as whose advice do you take and what the future of these companies are, the fun has in a way been stripped away from anybody that's not an extreme far leftist. Do you have any, if you were putting on your magic ball glasses, I don't know if those are a thing, but let's just imagine you could see into the future. Do you think Twitter is going to kind of get their act together a little bit and make this a site that more people want to use again? Or do you think they're just going to continue pushing their far left ideologies and destroying their platform? If you had to guess.
I mean, yeah, it could go either way. I don't know who they take their orders from. I don't know who their donors. I don't know who gets to say what. But if they continue their trend of getting rid of conservatives and having their leftist point of view, then they're just going to be in their own little bubble of leftists, and it's not going to be any fun anymore. The fun is when you have a lot of diversity of opinions. And so if they want to be relevant going forward, they want to be a huge business, they can be so incredibly successful if it was a level playing field.
Mm-hmm.
But they're going to be hurting themselves by continuing this method, and as they get exposed, as they look bad, as with Tim Pool on them, and there's a good interview with him and with Joe Rogan, and when people are going to see that, and then as people fall away, or there's going to be another social media platform that people are going to jump to, and they're going to have only themselves to blame. So it might be time to bring these voices back, change up the rules, and they'll continue to be incredibly successful and prosperous for a long time.
Yeah, we'll see. It was in wrapping this up here at about 3 hours, 10 minutes in, Joe kind of pointed out how they've been doing their show for, almost 3.5 hours, and nobody had to use the restroom. And the conversation kept going a little bit like that.
Because usually they usually drink a little whiskey or something.
Yeah, their legal team was not going to allow alcohol into that equation at that point. But and Joe started getting a little bit cranky at that point. I think he needed to use the restroom, and he's like, "All right, let's wrap it up." And Tim kept talking, and Joe started snapping at him a little bit. But in one of his snaps, he kind of said, "The demise of free speech has been greatly exaggerated." Well, you know what? That's easy for you to say, Joe. You put stuff up and people actually see it. You get 1.8 million views on your stuff. We're lucky to get 37 sometimes. I can't even search for videos that I put. We've done videos for 7-8 years here at the New American Media. I could type in my name. I could type in agree to disagree. I could type in the exact headline that we titled the video. It doesn't even show up on YouTube sometimes. My stuff has been thrown down the memory hole, never to be heard or seen from again. My sports shows have been demonetized and deboosted. It's easy for you to say, Joe, that the demise of free speech has been greatly exaggerated because you're succeeding. And that's where some people look at successful people. Well, why is Tim Pool? Why is Alex Jones? Why is Joe Rogan? Why are they succeeding? Are they controlled opposition? Are they bought and paid for? Because Joe announced, in the beginning, he said, to be fair, you are to Jack Dorsey. He said, one of your companies is a sponsor of my podcast. I want that to be clear. Tim Pool said, to be fair, I do own 30 shares of your stock, just so it's all out there. It's not a big deal, but it's something I want to make sure everybody knows, so it's easy for you to say, Joe Rogan, that the demise of free speech has been greatly exaggerated because you're not being shut down the way that we are. You host one of the most wildly successful programs on earth. For the rest of us, if we're not playing ball, if we're not in this camp, and if we're not bought and paid for, we're not getting the same love that you are. It's not a level playing field. For years, there used to be this degree of, you're just, it's all in your head. You're thinking this through too much. You're exaggerating. There's no proof to back this up. I think it's crystal clear, especially with the deboosting stuff that James O'Keefe and Steven Crowder are getting into. It's real. Certain content is being thrown down the memory hole, and other content is being allowed to thrive on a even playing field. It's not the same. So I just want to wrap it up by saying, yes, Joe, it's easy for you to say what you said, that the death of free speech has been greatly exaggerated because you're not being impacted the same way that a lot of the rest of us are. So I just want to caution against some of that. Wrapping up the comments here, Samuel Honeycutt is asking, what is your handle on Twitter? Blake's handle on Twitter is at eccentric99. That's at ECCENTRIC 99. And that's the numbers 99. On Twitter, we are at American_media_. That's at American_media_. And let's see. So there's that. Thank you for asking. It's never been a level playing field. And then Samuel saying, I'm 65 years old and I thought things would happen like this. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I knew that this is what it was, but you were called a conspiracy theorist. You're called a whack job. You're a Looney Tune. Wow. You're so disconnected. You think your stuff's so important that anyone would take the time to, whether it's algorithms or humans, you just got to get your channel flagged once. And you're done. You don't have a chance to earn revenue. You don't have a chance to make it in media right now. You get all the copyright claims and all the phony accusations thrown at you, and you don't have the same level playing field to compete. I think it's garbage, but I'm so excited. Go check out the Steven Crowder interview with He did a louder with Crowder with James O'Keefe and his half Asian lawyer. Check it out. It's very, very good. You got to support him. Kudos to really all four of them. You know, I was pretty harsh on the Twitter execs today, but they came in and they stood in the firing squad for 3.5 hours, almost 3.5 hours today. Kudos. You didn't have to do that. I would advise you not to do it again, but the version of me that wants a level playing field says you need to do this again. You need to keep talking because we're not believing you. We're not seeing it in the algorithms. So, Blake, final thoughts on this podcast in general, future of social media in general. Where do you want to take your final words today?
No, I mean, good point. Happy to see that they actually, jumped in and dealt with, Tim and Joe, and were, reasonably transparent, or at least dealt with some tougher questions this time, and for coming back, because in the softball interview, they didn't know if he'd be back or if it would be a long time. But yeah, they had Tim Pool right after, and then Tim Pool again joining up. So it was good to see that. I'd love to see the same thing for like YouTube, because you see, it's a huge company which drives an amazing amount of traffic. And I was like, I don't know. Does anybody know who runs that? Who's the board? Who makes decisions? It's very mysterious and creepy. But anyway, kudos to them for we got a little platform there, and the automatic this kind of live platform is cool. It'd just be nice to get not deboosted or whatever. And you have a level playing field and get a little out there so we can do more of this. So yeah, it's been a frustrating journey. Yeah, exactly as you said. Easy for Joe, and it's really tough for guys like us trying to do the same thing, put our opinions out there, and then just getting shut down and not knowing how or why it's done. So, but at least he, hosted those guys and challenged them and have a discussion about it. So that was good. So that's what I've got, Brian.
Making your way in the world today takes everything you've got.
Yeah.
Taking a break from all your worries sure would help a lot. Now I'm going to get my copyright flag because I quoted 2 lines from the Cheers song. Yep. Wouldn't you like to get away? Anyhow, I was fascinated by this. I just I had to listen to the whole damn thing. Sometimes I didn't want to click on analysis from Mark Dice or the Red Elephants or Anomaly. Like, I saw all these things popping up, and I was tempted to keep clicking on. I'm like, all right, what do you think? What do you think? I'm like, no. I want to know what I think. Before I go and listen to a single person give any opinion on anything, I want to get my first take first. And that's why I appreciate you coming on today. I know you had a chance to listen to some of it, and I took detailed notes and said, I'll steer the car.
20 minutes. So, but I'll get on that. No, it's an exciting thing. Yeah, it just came out yesterday. So, yeah, it's a lot of information to take in.
So much to unpack.
Taking some notes on it and doing the work on it, pulling the weight on this one.
Hey, it's all good. That's what the team effort is. Once again, follow Blake on Twitter. He's at eccentric99. Follow us. We're at American_media_, TheNewAmericanMedia.com. Under construction, ready to kind of like do a new thing for the homepage, but it's still a placeholder. Check it out if you want. YouTube.com/TheNewAmericanMedia. Click subscribe. Check out 8 years of the content. Like things. Put comments in there. It helps the algorithm or something. Let all that jazz. Facebook.com/TheNewAmericanMedia. You can join our private Facebook group, Agree to Disagree. And what else? Instagram.com/TheNewAmericanMedia. Snarky. It's good stuff over there. Just memes all day, only memes. So, Blake, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate your time. We'll be doing a lot more of this soon. We're going to try some different platforms here. I know I'm looking at you here on one platform, but I think I'm recording on a different screen for my QuickTime player, and I'm live on YouTube. So, I don't know. We're gonna make this work. I got all sorts of gear here. We're gonna put it all together, give you the highest quality audio that we can. We're gonna make it nice. I appreciate you being along for the ride. And Samuel said he just signed on to your Twitter. Thank you, Samuel Honeycutt. I hope you join Blake and myself as well. And Blake, I appreciate you, good sir. To be continued. We'll talk very soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Brian.
Peace. All right, there he goes, everybody. That's Blake Walley. I'm Brian Engelman signing out. I appreciate you. I love you. We'll talk again soon. Peace.